This week on The Breakout,
I talked to the Air Force Chief of Staff.
oh, did he say anything interesting?
Well,
Welcome to The Breakout. I'm Aaron Mehta.
and I'm Michael Marrow.
Michael, you're here because you had an exclusive sit-down with General David Allvin, the Air Force Chief of Staff. And look, Chiefs of Staff arguing for more budget is kind of one of their main jobs. You could argue maybe their biggest job. But it's usually going up the hill and saying broadly, defense needs more money. It's not usually saying, we need more money and we're willing to say it might have to come out of somebody else's pocket.
Right. So, General Allvin was very quick to support the other services, say, this is a joint fight. We all need each other. But he also did juxtapose what the Air Force offers versus the other services. And he made the case that, for a near peer or peer conflict with an adversary like China, especially in an environment like the Indo-Pacific, the Air Force needs to grow, even if that's at the expense of the other services.
Yeah, and so you specifically asked, to make sure I understand, you're saying this might have, well, you know what? Let's hear what you had to say.
Just to circle back to the implications of that, it sounds like the FY26 budget isn't finalized yet. That's still in flux. It sounds like, from what you're saying, that as the department is thinking big about these kinds of changes, that there are vulnerabilities, like you said, that are inherent in some other services form of maneuver, and to ameliorate that risk, more Air Force is the way. It may come at the expense of other services, it may not, but that's what it looks like.
That would be my case. I do believe when you look at what the environment privileges and what it punishes, I think the Air Force provides so much more of what it privileges and what it punishes. And I think that's a value proposition that the nation can decide.
That was pretty specific, but walk through some of his thinking.
Right. So really, he pointed to the Air Force's scheme of maneuver. The Air Force, he said, pointing to the service's agile combat employment concept, we can aggregate quickly, we can disaggregate. We can move, he said we can move at the speed of sound, whereas maybe the other services might move at the speed limit. The Indo-Pacific theater that he talked about, the enemy, in this case would be China, can strike quickly, overwhelmingly, rapidly at slower moving forces, and really it's speed and agility that that environment rewards instead of punishes.
All right, so who might be losing out in Allvin's construction here?
Right. I think you might have to take a look at surface forces in this case. This would be, large formations of ground troops, maybe even some ships even on the sea. Big, expensive things and groups of people that are vulnerable targets if they don't move too quickly.
He didn't say it, but it kind of sounds like an aircraft carrier if you want to extrapolate.
It could sound like a lot of things, but I did talk to an Air Force strategist after who was a little bit more blunt, who said, the joint forces are going to want air and space superiority in any theater, but especially in the Indo-Pacific, nobody's going to be screaming for ground forces to land and fight.
Okay, well, that's a pretty clear shot across the bow of the Army and to the Marines to an extent. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Michael's going to talk a little bit more about his interview.
At Leonardo DRS, our agility helps bring the ability to dominate in any scenario, on any platform, helping our warfighters accomplish the mission and get home safely. Leonardo DRS, our agility, your advantage.
All right, Michael, let's keep talking about your interview with General Allvin now. He talked a little bit about technology and the role the Air Force plays in that. What was kind of the big news from there?
Yeah, so, he talked about Air Force platforms as being kind of uniquely positioned to leverage emerging disruptive technologies that they're built with, open systems, architectures, government reference architectures, things that allow you to kind of plug and play. And I think, the reason why he brought these things up is we're seeing a challenge to the prime contractors. And, he talked about maybe these technologies could even help them. But, as we reported recently, the Army Secretary talked about it being a success if a prime contractor failed on his watch, if they weren't innovating enough. Allvin is making the case, not only are Air Force platforms, Air Force capabilities what you need for an Indo-Pacific fight, they're also poised to evolve with future demands.
Yeah. He also made a pitch that, you kind of flagged and thought this was interesting. It's kind of a pitch to the White House about why air power is something that's worth investing in.
Right. Yeah. He talked about, the Air Force is offering the ability to, not get entangled. And, listen to what he said.
If you want to send a clear message, and you can send air power, you can do a strike, you can do humanitarian relief, whatever it is, you can send that message and then get right back into, status quo ante, right?
Right.
Whereas if you're going to do it with other forces, the joint force, you're putting a lot of human life and resources there. And once you do that, you're sort of entangled, and it's tougher to disentangle from there. Once you're there, you're there.
Yeah, so I think you're absolutely right. That's targeted at a president who has shown in the past an interest in airstrikes as more of an option rather than deploying forces forward. Of course, a lot of the scramble that's going on is the result of this 8% budget drill reappropriation cut, however you want to describe it, from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, which has the services all scrambling to basically trim roughly 8%, figure out where to invest it elsewhere other than legacy systems. It seemed like Allvin looked at that as something that maybe has kickstarted a different kind of thinking about who gets what money in the building.
Yeah, he talked about reallocation of the Pentagon's budget as an opportunity to, quote, reset or even reshape the entire joint force. And he talked about, we'll see how the administration decides, what shares of the Pentagon budget are handed out at the end of the day. But really, you see this kind of motivating the Air Force's thinking. And it has them thinking that maybe they can grab a greater share of the budget once that process plays out.
So obviously, we'll be tracking the budget when and if it comes out with more details on this. In the meantime, make sure that you like and subscribe to The Breakout to get it delivered directly to you.
And if you listen to podcasts, just search Breaking Defense, and you can find us wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Aaron Mehta.
And I'm Michael Marrow.
Thanks for watching.